Okay, we'll step through these. I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with these. Perennial ryegrass, I think it's got a really limited fit up here. Okay, I don't think you're going to get a lot of good love out of perennial unless you go back to some really old Kangaroo Valley types, maybe on some of the higher country. Okay, they probably will survive and persist and set a bit of seed. But a lot of the new genetics, I don't know, Josh, up in the hills around here with the subtropical pressure, I don't know if they're going to be a winner.
No, tropical grass is a much better fit.
Yeah. Fescue, I guess this has always been one of my big frustrations is that fescue should work in lots and lots of places, but we can't quite get it there. You know, I've seen some fantastic fescue pastures. The challenges most people have with fescue is that the paddocks are too big. Okay, and I'll show you what happens as a result of that shortly, and they can't actually put the grazing pressure on it when it grows. If we can get fescue right, particularly continental fescues, we've probably got one of our few options that gives us year-round grass. All right? And I often look at fescue, and we've used it really successfully under irrigation in places like Manila and Dubbo in combination with prairie grass. That's how it should be when it's grazed. Okay, that's starting to get too long and cattle will start rejecting it, and that's what happens if you miss it. All right? And this is more what we'd call a Mediterranean type fescue where they had a really good spring. Okay, and they went and grazed the wrong paddocks and they let the fescue grow because they thought it'd make standover feed. It doesn't. It makes really good broom handles. Okay, and this is really hard to get around. This is probably harder and worse than a lot of your subtropicals in summer.
Okay. In that springtime, it's nearly like here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you do have fescue in your system, you want to have 3 or 4 paddocks. You put all your cattle in there, you eat it down and you move, and you've got to work on fairly strict rotational grazing with it. Okay, otherwise it'll do this to you when you're not watching. Okay, and then you're in trouble. Cocksfoot and clover, we do a bit of cocksfoot up here in the hills, don't we, Sil? Yeah, I think it's a really interesting grass, and I think, you know, there's ever evolving genetics in the space, and we're learning more about it. It's got the capacity to respond to a bit of summer rain. It's quite persistent. It handles a bit of acid soil quite happily. All right, handles a bit of wet feet quite happily. So, you know, as a temperate species, I think, yeah, it's probably not a bad fit. And I think local experience would back that up, wouldn't it, Albert? You know, that it sits in there pretty nicely.
Just the sensitive to that heat too, though. So north-west facing hills, all that sort of stuff, not as successful.
Yeah.
Know where you're putting it.
Know where you're putting it. Yeah, I mean, aspect becomes really important, doesn't it, Josh? Phalaris, not as much Phalaris up in these areas. Yeah, okay, probably more plains and western plains, but again, we use a fair bit of it. We won't go too much, but again, it's prone to get long, and the standing quality of it's not great, but it's all right. Mixed grass pastures, I quite like, if I'm looking at temperates, having not just a monoculture. I do think there's a lot of value, particularly when you've got paddocks where you've got different soil types, different aspects, okay, and unpredictable seasonality. I think the more unpredictable your season, if you want to get stuff that might grow all year, mixing up your grass species can be really, really important. These are some pastures getting established down at Bowral, okay, and it has got all of these in it. So what we've got here is we've got the fescue, which if we get a wet summer, it'll probably grow through. We've got the Phalaris and the cocksfoot, which give us pretty good winter spring growth and good autumn recovery. Okay, there's a bit of ryegrass in there too, which will work almost as an annual, drop a bit of seed and fill a few gaps. And I love having a bit of prairie in there. I think prairie in these mixed pastures is fantastic, just because it's a great plant, but also because it's one that recruits best from seed. Okay, so if you get a bit of a spring where your prairie sets seed, all right, that will come back quite vigorously and fill up a lot of the gaps in these mixed temperate pastures.
Like, mixes are great, but you've got to be careful not to go too far into mixes the other way, which we call shotgun type blends, which have 10 different types in there, and you end up with like 10% of nothing. So it's always try to work out what you think is going to be okay in that environment and put reasonable stuff into it, rather than ending up with something that goes well, but you've only got 10% population and you end up with weeds.
Yep. No, that's really fair, Josh. Subtropicals, I think, again, this is probably going to become, you know, if you're looking for alternatives to kikuus, you do actually have a suite of stuff that will grow pretty nicely in this region if you want to go through the work of establishing and clearing it. Yeah. Yeah, it grows everywhere very easily. Yeah, it will have gone crazy. And again, it's that issue of how do I manage the quality of Rhodes grass as well. You can make a silage, you can make a hay out of it. And again, it's about, if you're going to plan to do that, throwing a bit of fertilizer actually, you grow a bit more of it, but it actually increases the proportion of leaf in those crops as well. So, they are adapted, and the challenge, I guess, is getting legume activity in these, all right? Generally, when we're planting them, we plant them in late spring if you've got some subsoil moisture going into spring to go into summer. We don't tend to put the legumes in with them because you want winter active legumes, okay? And winter active legumes don't do well planted in spring. So what you'd normally do in the establishment is you get this stuff growing through the first summer, okay? And if you don't have any legumes or stuff in the way, you can control some of the broadleaves and rubbish that come up. Coming into autumn, that's when you'd put some subseed or medic and those sorts of things into these pastures as well to try and fill the gap and give you winter profile and start doing your nitrogen and a bit of hypha.
Stockpile option for grazing, like the cocky is, it'll get a lot of bulk, but you lose all your quality.
Absolutely.
So in terms of something that you can grow and retain for winter,
there's not much in summer that holds quality, to be perfectly honest.
Especially with our rainfall as well. So out west, when you get lower rainfall, and different soil types, you can actually stockpile some of that standing feed quite well, and we used to fatten cattle on it. On the coast, due to our soil types and also our rainfall, the quality doesn't stay in the pasture.
Doesn't hold, So again, it's the option is to, like the gentleman behind you, is if you can take a couple 100 tonne off, it does two things. It puts a stockpile in, but it also lets the winter stuff come through. That might be an effective way of dealing with it. That's what happens again to subtropicals, as you go into summer. And we've all, into winter, and this is what we've all seen, and this is what we've got to be cautious of. Lucerne, white clover, well adapted to this area, and again, there might be some value, again, if you're going across your farms and topping up your white clover stores, either with fertiliser, okay, mixing some sub or some white seed in the autumn now. If you're going out and fertilising pastures, it can build it up if you've lost some of that seed bank over the last 3 or 4 years. Medics, I don't know, medics grow well up in this region in addition to the subs in the hills. Okay, probably less so. They certainly are capable of growing in subtropical areas. So medics are winter active legumes that are annuals as well. And again, if you get a good year where they establish, they set a lot of seed, and a lot of that seed's got what we call hard seed. Okay, hard seed's a great thing. What it means, if you're talking about hard seededness, it means that only about 30 or 40% of that seed will germinate each year. All right? Because it's got those sort of coatings on it that take time to break down. So if you get a false break, or you don't get a seed set, a year later some of that seed will germinate again. Subclovers will do it, medics will do it as well. Shafted clover, probably not an issue or a player up here. We use this in combination with cropping. But that's what it looks like with ryegrass when it's grown, in irrigation country. Fantastic stuff, but probably not suitable for most of you guys. Good, heavy, dense population of sub. Been a lot of interesting breeding in sub clay. And subs, when you're looking at sub clovers, we want subs that mature at different times. Again, that spreads risk, okay? Because if they seed off early, okay, at least you get that one surviving the next year. The late seeding one that gets a drought doesn't get an opportunity to seed. Okay, the other thing that's coming into the sub breeding programs is more earth mite tolerance. So have a look for varieties if earth mites are an issue that have got a bit of bug tolerance. And it's one of these ways that we can holistically work to prevent insect problems. Arrowleaf clover, probably more an inland option. Grows well into the summer, off a good spring. I don't know if you've seen it. Plantain, okay, I really like plantain. I actually think it's quite well adapted to some of your acid hills here. Okay, it self-seeds, it comes back from seed really, really nicely. Okay, really, you'd only be putting in 1 kilo a hectare, and from that you're gonna get a lot of plants. But if you let it seed off that first year, it comes back as both a semi-perennial, but it also comes back as an annual from the seed.
And Neil, also very, very drought tolerant as well. I've seen paddocks of this that have been in drought. It puts up this sort of cotton ball out of the ground.
Yep.
And it actually pulls the moisture out of the atmosphere, okay, just to keep it alive. And then once it gets some rain, away it goes again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very successful.
No, I like it. And I think it's really probably useful in some of these hill systems. Herb legume blends, these are probably more specialist pastures that we use probably on better country. Okay, these are where we don't grow any grass. These are just legumes and herbs sown together. Okay, there's a bit of a process to getting these established, but they're incredibly nutritious and very, very good in finishing systems on better alluvial country, or if you've got a bit of water, and they're a very viable alternative to grass systems. Okay, and they've got the advantage, because there's no grass in the pasture mixes, we can actually control grass weeds and then with selective herbicides if that's what we want to do. All right, so these can be absolutely wonderful. I reckon probably 2-year pastures, Josh, not much more than that, depending on how well you manage your clover component. But really nutritious and very good quality summer feed as part of a portfolio. Absolutely. So this is something pivots out under Dubbo. Okay, it will grow in very hot environments very, very happily. All right. Okay, getting things right and planning. We're getting there, Albert. We're nearly sorted, mate. All right. Look, the things that we see farmers get wrong. Okay, and it's important to talk about it because we're all big people. We know we make mistakes. Okay. If you know you're going to do something and you need a contractor, don't ring them up the day before you want them, all right? Because you're guaranteed not to get them. So I guess we go through this process with our clients and say, are you getting all these steps in process well in advance of when you want to plant? And it comes back to this idea of strategy and tactics as being well ahead of the game because every other bugger wants the contractor the same day you want. All right, so just being well in advance of that process is really, really important, just from a practical perspective. If you've got your own gear, don't put it away at the last year unserviced and full of fertiliser, all right? It's amazing how many people go to get the sod seeder out, they need a few more discs and they need a few of this, and they ring up and because there's no inventory in store anymore, the parts are a month away, all right? And by the time you actually get stuff going, all right, you've missed it. You've missed it. So put stuff away serviced and ready to go. It's really, really important. It's just simple, practical stuff. But it's easy when we get to the end of planting, we just park the seeder, forget about it. Oh, yeah, I'll fix that just before seeding next time. Seeding comes around, no parts in town. 2 months later, you've missed the boat. If you know what you're doing with seed, get hold of it and get hold of it pretty early. There will be, because we've had a big break over a lot of country, okay, there will be a shortage of supply. And Josh might talk a little bit to this, but it's hard. You know, there's not no seed, but to get the seed that you actually want, rather than what the guy on the counter says is cheap and we've got plenty of, okay, can be problematic. So if there's something you really, really want, it's important looking well ahead and trying to get that secured. Josh?
Yeah, so obviously I work for a seed company, but there's huge issues with seed this year. So if we look at cereals, if we have droughts, okay, cereals are affected with droughts. They're all grown out west, down south, okay. So, for example, I had 300 tonne of an oat, one variety of oat sold. I got about 20 tonne of that to sell, and I sold 300 tonne. So, any of your cereals are really tight. And then the other one where that comes back to is once the cereals get tight, then your annual ryegrasses get tight. We've got lots of area up at Armidale and tablelands that haven't had feed for a long time. They're looking for quick feed. They've planted lots of annuals. They've backed off on the perennials and put more annuals in, which is going to affect you guys down here. And then once the annuals get affected, the Italians get affected. And then once they're affected, we've got brassicas now. We've got a lot of pressure on brassicas and all those sorts of things as well. So whilst stores do have some stock and they're going, oh, what normally happens is they buy a heap of stock early in the year, then they sell it, then they come back to us and say, can we get some more? We're finding they can't come back for that second or third bite because there's just none available. So typically they can have 2 or 3 bites at it. This year they're lucky to get one to 2.
So work out what you want and try and secure it as quickly as you can. But if you can't get what you want, try and talk to someone that knows what they're talking about alternatives. And, you know, there can be some pretty low-cost alternatives. You know, if we go and have a look at one of the dairies I work with nearby here, we'd love to have been sowing some of Josh's oats. There's none available. This year we're just going to use barley out of the silo, okay, as a companion plant to his ryegrass, okay, to get that extra bit of feed. It's not as predictable, it's not as reliable, but it'll do the job to get us that bit of extra feed on that first grazing. So there are options, but, you know, it's important to work those out early in the piece. Okay, fertiliser. All right, this just drives me nuts. These guys are having the same drought as these guys here, right? Okay, so you know, if... It's irrigated that bit. Oh, that's right. This had a little bit more water, hasn't it? Yeah. All right. I mean, basically, you know, this is what responses you can get with the same rainfall if your soil nutrition's right. Now, most of this will be nitrogen-based, and again, if we're short of feed, we shouldn't be afraid of judicious and responsible use of fertilisers like nitrogen. Okay, 2 tonne difference per hectare, in yield in between those, which is huge in a beef system. So if you're chasing a bit of feed, everyone seems really happy to spend a lot of money on concentrate. They don't like spending money on fertiliser other than superphosphate, all right? There are very, very strong and positive responses to nitrogen-based fertilisers in grassland systems, and you can use it responsibly without destroying your country, very, very profitably as well. Optimises the response to water and seed. You spend $300 a hectare on seed, and you won't put $50 worth of fertiliser on it a lot of the time. And I'm sure some people here do, but I'm sure there's opportunities that are missed as well. Nitrogen responses can be profound, even at these lower end rate responses of 10 kilograms per kilogram of nitrogen. $700 a tonne, your extra kilo feed is 14 cents. That's $140 a tonne dry matter, okay? Compared to buying anything. How much feed could you buy last year at $140 a tonne dry matter? None. Now, you probably couldn't have got a good response from nitrogen because it doesn't work if there's no moisture, okay? But when we're getting into situations where we have some moisture and we're short of feed, or if you've got a little bit of irrigation, making your irrigation work harder with the water that you've got, fertiliser is the key. And again, understanding that it's not just about nitrogen and the other nutrients are critical to acknowledge as well. Okay, and a bit of regular soil testing can save. I've got a large farm down at Orange that I work with, and the practice there was just dump. Whenever we've got a tax problem, we put super on everything. And occasionally they did have a tax problem. But, when we actually went out and soil tested, half their farm had more phosphorus than you'd need for 20 years, and half of them didn't have enough, okay? So a bit of judicious soil testing would have said, well, let's stop putting it here where we don't need it, let's put twice as much there. We can still fix our tax problem, but we're going to grow more grass where we really need it, and we're not, behaving irresponsibly with respect to the environment. Yeah, okay, that's just fertiliser. This is where they put a bit of nitrogen on 2 weeks after germination here, and they didn't put it on here. Okay, and again, just showing that benefit, a bit of an extra kick early in the process if you're chasing feed or if you want better establishment. All right, we might let Lyndall talk about some of these feed-related issues a bit later, but there are problems when we're putting cattle onto fresh feed. We're probably through a lot of that now, but it won't hurt to reflect on it. But there are toxicities we need to be aware of: nitrates, kikuyu poisoning, prussic acid, oxalates. I guess my core message is don't just have dead animals and think you know what's going on. If you have dead animals that have gone on fresh feed, get an accurate diagnosis. Because what happens is that people chase the wrong diagnosis, they chase red herrings, they go to the pub, they talk about the fact that kikuyu poisoning killed everything. Everyone gets scared of kikuyu, okay, and stop using it when it could have been something completely different. So, I think accurate diagnoses of things are dying are really, really important, just rather than just thinking you know what's going on.